My wife filed for divorce because her friends like to be with rich men, and she wanted to try that life. But now that she's trying to come back, I told her we don't need her with the kids. About 7 months ago, Emma, my ex-wife, who is 42, and I, 44, moved because of her new job. She had been offered a high-level position at a company she applied to without my knowledge. The reason she did it was that she knew I would never agree to move. We had been together for 12 years, married for 10, and we have 8-year-old twins. Both families are here, and a few years ago, my father was diagnosed with leukemia. Since then, it's been really hard for our family because my father's health has not been good, and we always fear the moment we might lose him. Naturally, as his only child, I want to be here for him and my mother, so I didn't want to move after my father's diagnosis. I thought Emma would understand what I was going through, but instead, she told me I was being too sensitive and couldn't keep rejecting job opportunities out of state just because my father was sick. Before my father fell ill, we had actually been planning to move because she wanted a change of pace. But after my father's diagnosis, I told her it was no longer possible for me. She tried to understand at first, but gradually over the last year or so, she started to feel very restless, and we fought a lot about this. She wanted to move because she felt stuck here, and I couldn't think about leaving while my dad was in such condition, especially since it would mean leaving my mother to deal with everything alone. Even if I had siblings, I wouldn't have been able to leave because my conscience wouldn't have allowed it. I tried to explain that to Emma, but she refused to see my point, feeling I was being selfish, while I thought she was the selfish one. Then earlier this year, one day, she came home from work and told me she had applied for a well-paid position at a company out of state and that she got the job. That shocked me, and I wanted to be happy for her, but I just couldn't because she hadn't told me anything about this application or job. I was somewhat in shock, so I just congratulated her and didn't say anything that day. I remember we had a fight because she didn't think I was happy enough for her, despite it being a big deal. I must admit it was a good job with decent pay, but I was upset that she hadn't even thought to discuss it with me before applying. She said she didn't even think she would get the job, but now that she had it, she was thinking of moving and wanted me to go with her. She wanted to relocate our whole family, knowing how I felt about it, so we ended up fighting about that. It was one of our worst fights, so bad that she ended up going to stay with her parents for a couple of days, and we didn't have any contact during that time. I actually thought she would file for divorce and end this, but then she came back, and we decided to try to work things out because we still had the kids, and we didn't want to let them down. At that point, I thought I could still make it work with her because I didn't want to leave this marriage. I was sure I loved her, and she said she loved me too, which is why we wanted it to work. But she also didn't want to give up her dreams. So after a lot of discussions, we decided she would take the job, and I would stay here. She told me she would try to travel back and forth as often as she could so we could make this work. We had no choice but to opt for a long-distance marriage for now since neither of us was ready to let go of each other. It was tough for me to accept, but I had to do it at least for a while until we could figure out what we wanted to do in the future. Then she left and started coming home every other weekend. Even then, she could only spend 2 days with us and would take a flight back on Sunday afternoons because she had to be back for work on Mondays. It was exhausting for her, and I knew it, but there was nothing I could do as she had already agreed to this arrangement. Over time, I guess she began to resent me, and her attitude towards me worsened. We had promised to try to make it work, but every time I tried calling her during the week, she was always very cruel, and we ended up arguing about something. At one point, it seemed like she didn't even want to talk to me at all. Instead of calling her myself, I started waiting for her to call me first, and soon we began to talk less and less. Even when we did talk, it was always very cold and awkward, and I didn't know what to think about it. Finally, after being apart for almost 4 months, she came home one weekend and brought divorce papers. At that moment, things were really tense between us. She told me she couldn't take it anymore. When she returned that weekend, we hadn't talked for almost 6 days straight because of the fight we had the last time we spoke. I wanted to find a reason to not get divorced, but I couldn't think of anything because the last fight we had was when she actually suggested separating and ending the marriage for good. I should have seen it coming. For months, we had not only been fighting, but she had also been getting closer to a high school friend. Let's call this friend Melissa. She was not a good person and was an even worse influence. Emma had always been good friends with Melissa, and that woman had even been a bridesmaid at our wedding. But I never liked her because she always gave off a strange vibe. From what I knew about her, she was a total gold digger, always going after rich married men, so she wouldn't have to commit to them but still get the benefits of being with a wealthy man. She even bragged about it as if what she did wasn't detestable enough. When I used to mention her behavior to Emma, she would tell me it was her personal choice and that we shouldn't judge her. That was pretty irritating, so eventually I stopped talking about Melissa and decided to ignore that friendship altogether. It got easier to do that because after Melissa moved away and Emma was busy with work and the kids, they drifted apart a bit anyway. I knew that Melissa had also been living in the same state with her child for a couple of years since she moved after her second divorce, probably to seek out new prey. Coincidentally, when Emma got a job in the same state, she reached out to Melissa, who showed her around the city and helped her move and all that. I hoped maybe Melissa had mellowed over the years, but she was still the same strange person. I didn't feel comfortable with Emma being so close to Melissa again, but she was the only friend Emma had there, so I couldn't really say anything about it. In the months Emma had been there, she told me that Melissa had been very supportive since she was alone, and that she had even introduced her to a couple of her friends. This group of people that Melissa introduced to Emma was pretty odd because, as far as I remember, it was a group of 3 or 4 women who were all single mothers. They met through Facebook and had some sort of support group on the platform. According to what Emma told me, these women had been with men, had children with them, but for various reasons, their partners abandoned them, and now they were raising their kids alone. The only support they received was child support. However, it wasn't as sad as it sounded because most of the women Melissa got along with were like her. They went after very rich men, had flings with them, got pregnant, and then when these men decided to stay with their wives and families, these women managed to get large child support payments that maintained their lifestyle. It was, in fact, not just support for them, but also a payout to keep their mouths shut, since I suppose these men didn't want their flings to reach their wives. It was very common for all of them to have some online business that no one really cared about, but they were self-employed and wanted people to believe they were doing everything on their own. In reality, they were running a scam and prided themselves on being independent women who had all the freedom in the world to live by their own rules while living off the money of men who had been dumb enough to fall into their traps. Emma thought it was funny, but to me it felt disgusting, and I didn't think it was a good idea for her to socialize with them. However, she kept defending her friends and told me she had met them personally and that they were all really nice women. Since we were already fighting about so many things, I didn't want to argue about that too, so I said nothing. But then in the last fight we had just before she filed for divorce, she told me she really admired Melissa's strength because even without any man's help, she was brilliantly raising her 2 kids on her own. I ended the call dismissively and told her that anyone who made that much money by getting pregnant after a fling with rich men would probably be taking good care of the kids since they weren't their children, but rather a lottery ticket for them. That led to a huge fight between us. Frustration had been building up for months, and that day, that small disagreement was enough to trigger both our anger. We started cursing at each other, telling each other exactly how much we had tried to make it work, but unfortunately, we didn't succeed. Even the kids, for whom we were supposedly together, barely saw us together, and when we were together, we weren't happy. So instead of letting them grow up in a toxic environment, we decided to get a divorce. The divorce process was relatively simple since there is no waiting period in our state, and we just had to split our joint assets, which was fairly straightforward. I ended up keeping the house and the kids since she didn't want to take them right then, and she said that for now, we could stick with the arrangement of her coming back here each week to see them. We had been sharing the cost of raising them anyway, so we continued doing that. Once they were a bit older, we would let them decide what they wanted to do. It wasn't convenient for either of us, but we didn't want to fight for custody since we believed our kids deserved both parents in their lives. As for the house, we had a verbal agreement that we would put it up for sale in a few years, and when it sold, we would split the money. The divorce was finalized about a month ago, and I didn't think she would want to talk to me after that because even while we were in the divorce process, we barely had anything to discuss outside of meetings with our attorneys. Now that everything was set, I was trying to cope with the situation, although it seemed nothing had changed since we were still following the same routine. Life was definitely going to be quite different for me now that I was no longer married to Emma. My kids were also very confused about what was happening, so I had to explain to them that their mother and I were no longer together. Although nothing had changed exactly, last night she decided to call me again so we could sort things out and give the relationship another chance. Apparently, she had made a huge mistake and wanted to reverse the divorce. I could tell she had been crying and was pretty hysterical on the call. She started ranting about how she had inadvertently idealized the lifestyle that Melissa and her friends lived because of that group. She hadn't mentioned it before because she knew how I felt about Melissa, but after our last fight, she had talked to her group of friends, and they told her to go for the divorce. Initially, she was skeptical, but they convinced her. Then she spoke to a lawyer they recommended, but a month had passed since then, and she had literally tried everything to move on, like dating apps, blind dates, and going out almost every night. But she just ended up having casual encounters. This had only made her feel pathetic because, at least with me, even when we were fighting, she knew I loved her, and I loved her too. Now she was really alone, and more than anything, she also missed the kids. Her friends told her this would pass, but she hadn't been able to shake off the loneliness and guilt after the divorce. Also, her company had been doing pretty well when she joined, but she had undergone several pay cuts since then. Apparently, they had exaggerated how well they were doing to bring her into the company, and her current income didn't match what they had initially offered her. Not only her, but everyone in the company had been through the same. They keep telling people that things will improve if they keep working hard, but she believes it is just to retain employees. That is another reason why she wants to come back to me. She said she really wanted me to reconsider reversing the divorce because she just misses her family and what used to be her life. But after she finished explaining her situation to me, I felt furious with her because I couldn't believe she had let her immoral friends convince her. I had warned her about Melissa and made it very clear I didn't like the company she was keeping after moving, but she never paid attention, and now they had turned out to be the reason she made the decision she did. If it had been her mistake, I could have been understanding, but the fact that she decided to listen to people I hated really bothered me. The audacity to call me and start crying about all these things as if it had all been easy for me just made me furious. I ended up blowing up at her and told her she had to manage alone now because I wasn't going to help her. Despite everything, I tried my best to make this marriage work. I'm not just talking about the last few months, but since my father got sick. I had been fighting for our marriage tirelessly, and for a time she did too. But she had been incredibly selfish over the past few years, and that's how we ended up here, divorced. The least she could have done while she was away was try to understand my feelings and my situation. Instead, she let herself be swayed by friends she knew I didn't like. I told her she wasn't a teenager anymore, and that a childish excuse like her friends influencing her to make bad decisions wasn't going to work with me. She wasn't coming home drunk to her parents. This was a very different situation, and it had impacted my life and even the kids. Now, just because it's uncomfortable for her, she wants to reverse the divorce in the first place? Of course, that's not how it works. And secondly, even if it did work, I wouldn't be doing it. I was really upset about everything she had just said. I simply couldn't hold it in, so I told her if she was really feeling lonely and guilty, then she should ask her friends for help. I'm sure that if they were the ones who encouraged her to seek the divorce, they would care enough about her to help her if she wasn't okay financially, but also emotionally too. It also bothered me a lot that she had basically confessed she had been having casual encounters with random people in the last month after our divorce. Technically, she was single, so she could do whatever she wanted, but it made me feel really uncomfortable and depressed because I felt she had devalued what we shared over the last 12 years. So I told her I didn't want her back in my life, especially after everything she just told me, and that I was going to make sure the kids stayed with me because I wasn't sure if she was a good influence on them. She started crying harder and told me she was willing to do whatever it took to make things right, but I told her she had made a decision and she had to live with it, that the kids and I didn't need her anymore. Then I hung up and blocked her. When I woke up this morning, I had several messages from my ex-in-laws. They were telling me I shouldn't have said the things I said because she was already really depressed, and it wasn't nice of me to kick her when she was down. They said it wasn't necessary because she was already regretting everything she had done, and it seemed like I was trying to punish her more by saying the kids and I didn't need her. I wouldn't have cared what my ex-in-laws said, but they had been very kind to me after the divorce, so I don't know. Am I the bad guy for telling my ex-wife I didn't want her back and that the kids and I didn't need her anymore? Update 1, thank you very much for all the support you have shown me in the comments. I don't know how to express it, but it really means a lot to me to know how many people are on my side in this situation. It means even more to me that so many of you have identified with my story and reached out to tell me that things will get better. It's very kind of you, and I know things will get better. It's been 4 days since I posted and blocked Emma after our conversation, so she hasn't been able to contact me. This weekend, she is supposed to come to see the kids and spend some time with them, so I don't know what will happen then. Over the last few months since the divorce started, she only picked up the kids from my house and went to her parents' house for the weekend with them, occasionally spending some time here with all 4 of us for some family activities. But mostly she tried to keep her distance from me, and I was fine with that because it just made things easier for me. This weekend, however, is uncertain. I'm actually a little worried about having to see her because her parents have been very upset with me, and they've told me the things I said were so harsh that she ended up crying every time they called her since then. I haven't responded to any of their messages because I really don't know what to say, but I feel a bit bad because I know Emma is a very emotional person, and I managed to hit her in a painful spot because she's been crying so much lately. Even though she hasn't been exactly nice to me and our circumstances haven't been the best, I still feel really sad for her because we could have had a great life. I feel like she ruined it herself. I did my best to make it work, but it's not like I could make the marriage work on my own without any help from her side. Update 2. Emma came yesterday to pick up the kids and we ended up having a conversation about everything that had been said. It was evident from her appearance that she was going through a very tough time. I could see it on her face, and I found it very hard to be cold with her. She asked me if I would be willing to talk to her, even if just a little, and I ended up agreeing. Once the kids were in their room, we started talking. She told me she was really sorry about everything, and not just referring to the recent months, but to the last few years. It had been hard for her to realize how selfish she had ultimately been, and she even said she didn't deserve to be with me. She explained that in the last few weeks after the divorce, every time she went on a date or met some man, the only thing she could think about was how she wasn't sure if that was the life she wanted for herself. She felt guilty for throwing everything away. She had idealized it, but it wasn't as great as she thought it would be. By the time she realized this, it was too late because she had already lost me. While she was talking, she began to cry again, and I tried to console her, but she told me that would only make her feel worse because it only made her realize what kind of person she was and how badly she had treated me. It was bittersweet to hear those things about me because I would have really appreciated them when we were together, but now I'm not sure what to do with that. Anyway, after a while, she told me she had decided to leave her job and move back here to be closer to her family. She also wanted to spend more time with the kids because she had already lost so much time with them. It wasn't worth staying away for so little money and sacrificing so much. The only request she had for me was not to file for full custody like I had said I might do. I told her not to worry. I had said that in the heat of the moment, but I had no intention of doing so because both she and I had always taken good care of our kids. I knew they missed their mother, so spending more time with her would undoubtedly do them good, and I would support that. After we finished talking, she apologized once again and told me I was a good man. She also promised she would try to be a better mother and a better person, and she thanked me for allowing her to talk to me after everything that had happened instead of just shutting the door in her face. That moved me a bit, but I didn't say anything, and then she left with the kids. So, that was it. I didn't expect things to turn out this way. I thought she was going to come and fight with me, but this was nice and unexpected. She has apologized, and I'm not going to say I forgive her, and that everything is in the past, but at least we are on the right path now. I don't think I can go back to her. That seems unrealistic after everything that has happened. But the least we can do is try to raise our children as best as possible and make this as peaceful as we can for them. And of course, it will be better for us too. Now let's see what the future holds for us. Update 3. Well, it's been 4 months since my divorce, and after my last update, Emma has kept her word. Within a few weeks, she left her job and moved back here. Since then, our kids have been splitting their time between the 2 of us. They spend half the week at my house and the other half with their mother, and so far this has been quite convenient for them. Emma initially stayed with her parents but found an apartment a few blocks away. The kids are having a lot of fun with their 2 homes now. As for my ex-in-laws, we are back on normal terms. We don't talk regularly, but they apologized for bothering me when Emma was going through her crisis. They told me it wasn't my fault, but her parents were really stressed and ended up blaming me in a reflexive act. Emma and I are also back on good terms. I wouldn't say we are friends, but we are polite and have kept things civil. I'm also moving on slowly and trying to process everything that has happened. So far, things are going well, and I'm hopeful it will continue to improve. Update 4. It has been almost 7 months since my divorce, and I wanted to share a significant update. A couple of months ago, I met someone and we have started dating. She is a single mother, and her kids are about the same age as mine, which I think can be quite good. It's been nice to date someone again, and I feel good in this relationship. My kids, for their part, have often told me it would be okay if I started dating. I didn't have to stay alone for that. I've been seriously thinking about introducing them to my new girlfriend now that I believe they will handle it well, and it will be a positive transition for everyone. They may even get along with my girlfriend's kids. However, this update isn't just about that. It's also about something that has happened with Emma. A few days ago, when Emma came to pick up the kids, she asked me if we could sit down in the living room while the kids were upstairs finishing getting their things. To my surprise, Emma told me that it had been a long time since our divorce, and now that we were getting along, she would like us to go on a date to see how things go. She explained that since returning to the city, she hadn't gone out with anyone and hadn't been in touch with Melissa or her other friends. For her, it would be an opportunity to see how she feels and if we could reignite what we had. It was a bit awkward given everything I've told so far, and I didn't know how to tell her, but I finally said that I had met someone and was even thinking of introducing her to our kids. Although we are both in a better place now and getting along, I don't think it's a good idea to try a relationship again. Emma took it calmly and thanked me for being honest with her, although I knew she felt a bit hurt by all of this. But even if I hadn't met someone yet, I still maintain that giving our relationship another chance is a bad idea. Update 5. I wanted to give you a small update on how things are going. First, regarding my father, since many have been asking. He is still struggling with his health issues, but I'm relieved to say he's slowly improving. It's been a long and complicated process, but he is a fighter, and his recovery has given us all a bit of hope. As for my personal life, I recently introduced my kids to my new girlfriend. I was a little nervous at first, but I'm very happy to say they welcomed her quite well. They seem to get along with her, and that has been a huge relief for me to know my kids are comfortable and happy with this new dynamic. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Also, not long ago, I had the opportunity to meet my girlfriend's kids. We decided to have a barbecue at my house so everyone could hang out together in a relaxed environment. It was an amazing day. The kids got along really well, playing and laughing as if they had known each other forever. I'm very pleased with how things are progressing in both my personal life and my father's health. I deeply appreciate the support and best wishes from everyone.